overseas, I think. And this means that spouses are entitled to carry their own cards alongside the member, the husband or the wife or the partner. And if you'd like to apply for that, please contact the office and one will be issued to you. So this is a way of getting more people through the club, something that had lapsed. Looking forward, we have tomorrow a film from India, Earth, directed by Deepa Mehta, which has got very, very strong reviews. It's an Indian-Canadian film. And just to balance things out, as one has to do, the following week we have a film from Pakistan called Dukta, which means daughter, and that's directed by Afia Nathaniel. On the Tuesday the 26th, that's next week, we have Norachit Sinaseni coming here to talk about Thailand's new constitution. He is one of the people who's been involved in drafting it, so this is very much an official evening. But we're also reaching out to the political parties to get their response, and we're hoping to do a complementary programme on the 10th of May. So that's something well worth watching for. Then next Wednesday, it's all happening next week, we're taking a look at Thailand's gold mines, and we have a stupendous panel of 6 people, which is going to be completely unmanageable. And they're going to talk about the situation that's arisen whereby Thailand allegedly has 144 tons of potential gold deposits, which is worth almost 200 billion baht. So obviously that's generated a fair amount of interest, but there are some serious environmental issues that go along with that. And then on June 22nd, a long way down the line, we're taking a look at Thai Buddhism and its condition at the moment, which is not so hot. And we'll have Sulak Sivalak here, who's Thailand's leading social critic, and Vichak Panit, who's an adept of Vajrayana Buddhism, and I'm sure that panel will expand. And then also on June 8th, we're having a program on gender objectification, which is basically how women are treated in Thai entertainment and media, and so that should be quite interesting. And so to this evening, Burma, Myanmar. Can I invite my distinguished panel to join me? They're ignoring me. All right. Whilst they ignore me, I'll introduce them. They're getting their drinks. They have more important things to do. Leading the way, we have Gavi Chongkitawarn, who is now a senior fellow at Chulalongkorn University's Institute of Security and International Studies. And he's a veteran journalist who was with The Nation for many decades, still writes columns for them. And he's a former president of the Thai Journalists Association, and was a special assistant to the Secretary General of ASEAN from 95 to 96, when he used to be able to get into all the conferences that the other journalists were kept out of. It was rather unfair. But anyway, Gawi has taken a special interest in the region and covered Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma. Then we have Gwen Robinson, who's the chief editor of the Nikkei Asian Review, which is a magazine and a website that's emerged in recent years and harks back to the great days of the Far Eastern Economic Review and Asia Week in a new setting. She was with the Financial Times. Sorry? Oh, yeah, there are free copies of the Nikkei Asian Review, for which I also work in the interests of openness. But anyway, there are free copies at the door. Gwen was with the Financial Times for 18 years and returned to the Nikkei in 2013. And her postings have taken her to Tokyo, London, Bangkok, New York, everywhere. And then finally we have Nirmal Ghosh, who is the president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand for his sins. And he's also the Indochina bureau chief for the Straits Times. And he's been with the Straits Times for nearly 20 years, also in New Delhi and Manila. And in Manila, he was the president of the Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines. Right, and so to this evening, I remember when I was covering Burma in 1988, when things were quite lively, somebody wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and it was an old Asia observer, and we were ticking off the 26 years of the Ne Win administration routinely. And this old hand made this comment that it would probably take another 26 years to sort out the mess in Burma. And I remember thinking at the time that that was extremely pessimistic, because I'd actually seen the uprising in Rangoon and felt the passion of the people, the yearning for change, which nobody could miss. And yet, sadly, it turned out to be true. And fast forward, we're here in 2016, and we've just seen the unthinkable occur, which is Aung San Suu Kyi basically take over as head of government de facto behind the scenes. And I remember when I first met Suu Kyi in 88, just after the coup, the first question I asked her was whether she felt her future was in Burma or the UK, because she was married to an English academic. And she was pretty ticked off at me about this question and said, well, I've always made it perfectly clear that when my country needed me, I would return and carry on. And it was a very interesting Suu Kyi trait that she imagined that everybody was inside her head and knew all about her background and everything. Anyway, she's one of the great personalities of regional politics. And we have three people sitting here who have been lucky enough to watch recent developments very close up. And I thought we'd kick off this evening with Namal, who wants to go back to the 2007, the second uprising, which is always misnamed the Saffron Revolution. It's misnamed because Burmese monks don't wear saffron and because it wasn't a revolution, but apart from that, it went very well. So, Namal, why don't you pick up the story?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dominic, there's a lot of sort of Burma, there's a lot of old Burma journalists over here in this room. So, in fact, later on it'll be great to hear from others. It's not just us, but, a lot of you. Dominic himself was there in the late 80s and 90s as well. So, I was fortunate to get some FaceTime with Kim Nyunt and other major army commanders when Burma was trying to become a member of ASEAN. This was in the very early 90s, and from that I got a sense that the military was really wanted to be understood, so to speak. They were prone to giving journalists and of course in their speeches, they're prone to giving lectures about history, about the army's role, and so on and so forth. So I went through that phase, and then I pulled out of Burma and went to the Philippines for some years, then went back to India, then came back here, and I happened to be there during the so-called the Saffron uprising. And what happened, and then of course there was Nargis. After I wanted to start with 2007 because I was sitting right here after 2007 when I came back from Yangon. I reached Yangon the night that the army cracked down on the monasteries and basically crushed the uprising. So I was there for a few days after that, and then I came back and we had a panel over here. I remember it was a pretty packed evening because in those days we were starved of information from Burma, and this was the case as well during Cyclone Nargis, when then Secgen of ASEAN, Surin Pitsuwan, was having press conferences here and briefing us about the role that ASEAN played in overcoming the suspicions of the regime in Burma and getting access to the areas that were struck by Cyclone Nargis. So fast forward a little bit to the transition, and basically I found that in a sense the media may have even missed the story, the real story, the big story for many years, because the regime was following, it had its roadmap, its so-called roadmap to democracy, and everybody of course was busy trashing the roadmap. And for very good reason. I mean, the military regime was incompetent, the crony corruption, cronyism and corruption, and so on and so forth, and the poverty of the country, the isolation of the country, the incompetent response to Nargis, And there's a never-ending list of these issues, but they still follow the roadmap. And the referendum they had, the constitution they had, the parliament they established, they even built this parliament. While everybody was laughing at Naypyidaw, I mean, all of us were. We were like laughing at the folly of it all, at building this capital in a country like this, these huge sort of plush buildings out there. While we were laughing at it, they were actually following this roadmap. And as I said, they actually built a parliament. So I think we sort of missed it. And when the transition happened, it was important to change the lens through which one viewed Burma. One needed to sort of shift and see Burma more as a quote-unquote normal country, as normal as it can get in, say, Southeast Asia, in Indochina, in any country which has had a long history of military rule. And there's no shortage. I mean, there are countries like Philippines, Indonesia, Pakistan, where the armed forces have played a major role for decades, right? So you had to see Burma, you had to shift away from the black and white view of Burma and see it through a different lens. So that I thought was one of the most challenging things. And during my coverage of the transition, I was, from meetings with people involved in the transition, figures in the government, I was quite convinced. I was always wary. Of course, you have to be wary that it's all a big sham or something. But I was personally quite convinced that they were serious about it. But the moment Burma opened up, there was a lot of noise as well, from the local media, which suddenly sort of exploded on the scene. All that pent-up emotion came out in the local media, and there were very extreme and loud views on both sides. There was a lot of media, a lot of activism. It said that this opening up is a sham that's designed to sort of hoodwink the international community, lift the sanctions, bring in more money into the country, and so on and so forth. So one had to navigate all these various very loud and extreme biases. And in an era when the Burmese not only discovered this sort of freedom and democracy, which they had really wanted at a very visceral level for so long, but also came in the age of social media and the internet. So there was a blizzard of information, and of course misinformation, that we all have to deal with as journalists nowadays. And so one had to navigate all these complexities and try and unpack them and interpret them for the outside world, so that without falling into the trap of your someone's subjective notions. This is very important, I think, for covering in covering a country as complex as Myanmar. And the closer you get, the more it seems to dissolve in front of you. Of course, you could see that of many countries, or probably all countries. But in Myanmar, it's particularly acute because it was closed off for so long, and any journalists who went in as tourists, went in sort of undercover, hurriedly went in, walked across the border or flew into Burma and then hurriedly left after a few days, that kind of thing. So one was only sort of scratching around, and you only had the extreme voices. So I think I won't talk too long because, as I said, we have two other panelists who Gwen has covered it even very, very closely, and Kavi has a great sort of regional vision as well. And we have other people in the room who've covered Burma, and it'll be great to hear your views. But just fast-forwarding to the election campaign. Just before the election, I was actually with Gwen. We went down to Hintada in the Delta, and we were talking to ordinary people in the bazaar, and everybody, of course, said they were going to vote NLD. And because of the pluralism in Burma, the plural political landscape, with so many, how many political parties registered for the election? It was a staggering number of political parties registered for the election. One was tempted, 90 plus or 100 plus, one was tempted to think, okay, there could be a really contested election. So we were very cautious. But there were people in Hintada who said that they appreciated what the USDP candidate, Teu, extremely senior Teu, they had appreciated what he had done for them, and he had done quite a lot. But they would still vote for the NLD. So basically it was an emotional vote. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And if anyone wants to know any specifics about actually covering Burma experiences and anecdotes, I mean, feel free. It's an open forum, and I'll hand it over.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about people who cover Burma is that it gets right under your skin, and it's probably the story that people in this part of the world who've covered the region find the most interesting. It's rather inexplicable, and a good example, I think, is Gwen, who's been. You find it a very compelling story of all the stories in the region. This is the one that you're always going back to cover. Maybe you'd like to explain why.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to also second what Nirmal said and say I do hope we have a bit of a discussion afterwards and people can share their experiences or insights and ask questions. So I would like to keep my chat fairly short. But I agree with Dominic. Myanmar gets under your skin, I suppose, in a way that, so does actually. A lot of countries, particularly in this region, do. They're utterly fascinating, and each one is so different. If I'm in Cambodia, I get really involved in Cambodia, but I think Myanmar, more than any other country, has had more than its fair share of life and death issues, this extraordinary number of ethnic armed groups, insurgencies, extremist Buddhists, reformers, the Aung San Suu Kyi figure, a Nobel Prize winner sitting there locked up. It's had all the ingredients of fairy stories, Hollywood, thriller novels. You could not find, I think, a country that sort of has that amount of issues all packed in quite densely, although I covered Cambodia in the 80s, shortly after the very traumatic 70s, and that also was very, very compelling, but in a very grim, bleak, and not entirely vibrant way. So that's why I think I hope I will always keep going back to Myanmar. And you struggle to learn about it, but the great thing about Myanmar also is I think anyone can go there as a first-timer and be utterly fascinated, read some books, get some understanding of the country very quickly. But, you can also become deeply specialist and read, the body of academic, scholarly work and also journalism, good and also not so good, I must say, is just vast, much more than I think on any other country in the region. So you learn it like a language, and after a while I guess it just keeps pulling you back in. Anyway, these days, I'm responsible for the whole of Asia, so that means everything from Australia to Nepal and Bhutan. So I don't have as much time to go back to Burma, but I'm still trying to follow it very closely. And I was going to say, when Nirmal mentioned reporting the elections from, one spot was Hintada, where we both happened to be on the campaign trail and ended up there, which was as he said, the constituency of Teu, who is the very key, very well-connected head of the entire USDP ruling party. And that, I'll just say, it really struck me, that particular trip. And in the election campaign, I went all over, and I went to Shan State and Bago, where various personalities were running, and right through Ayeyarwady, Naypyidaw, Yangon, Pinluin, Mandalay, everywhere. But the Ayeyarwady trip was so fascinating because of this dichotomy that Nirmal was talking about, that, every second person was sure they were going to vote for the NLD, but they were turning up with outpourings of affection for this big USDP man who had paid for their children's hospitals and supported schools, and they were very grateful. But, when it came to voting, and I wasn't sure, but another few colleagues were there, Jonathan Head from the BBC and also Tom Fuller from the New York Times, and we all had different views. And as it turned out, I don't think any of us really predicted how much of a landslide it really was, even there, even the heartland of USDP, former ruling party, military-backed regime. And just short way away was President Thein Sein, the former president's hometown. And again, this perception that, that somehow the ruling party might hold on, hang on, and have a reasonably respectable showing. I don't think anyone really expected them to win, let alone get a majority, but a lot of long-time observers were surprised. I think also about the elections, what was most surprising was that the ruling party, they were relatively clean, fair, without violence, and in fact, the big question was whether the ruling party would accept these results, and that the military would also accept and stand by, and what we've seen transpire has transpired. So when I think back to when I first began covering Myanmar, which is not nearly as long before as someone like Dominic or some of you in this room, but I was very lucky just to arrive here for the Financial Times at the beginning of the Thein Sein administration. And so I've seen this last 5.5 years very close up, covering for the Financial Times and then from 2 years ago for the Nikkei. And even the change in 5 years has been just extraordinary. You can't even imagine. I can't imagine what people who were covering it in 1987 or 88 felt, although you've given us a bit of insight, Dominic. Maybe we can hear a bit more about that. But that said, I'd just like to run through a couple of other observations, and I'll keep it very short. I think really what we've really seen is this extraordinary opening up, which for journalists has changed the whole game of covering Myanmar. So as Dominic said, in the old days we sneaked in, people had fake names, fake passports, God knows what. You're always trying to dodge surveillance. Now, I think my new theory about covering Myanmar is it's gone too much the other way. Everyone wants to talk. They're enjoying their freedom. There's less and less fear, and there was a time where you couldn't mention Aung San Suu Kyi's name and people would be frightened that they could get locked up for having a photo of her. And many, taxi drivers at the beginning when I first started covering would have a little picture of her that they'd keep hidden, and they had it there somewhere, which again was a risk. If you were caught with it, you could really get put in jail. So I think that's been facilitated by, and it has to be said, the former regime, the military-backed regime that came in and implemented a lot of these reforms, lifted controls on media. Suddenly you had this vibrant, almost out-of-control media. At one point, 25 daily newspapers from a time where there were no daily newspapers allowed apart from the government propaganda organ. So that facilitated a lot of information for the first time. There was heavy censorship and also mobile and internet. You cannot imagine this country which even 3 years ago, almost no one had a mobile and almost no one could get on the internet because it cost, how much was it? $1,500, $2,000 for a SIM card. And now they're like, how much is it? 1,000 chat? Like 80 cents for a SIM card. Everyone has like 4 or 5 SIM cards. There's 3 operators all competing. It's almost, even you go into the countryside and a farmer I was interviewing could check the daily rice price on his mobile, whereas before they would sit there and once a week the rice trader would come and tell him what the price was, and he had no idea if it was a good price or a bad price, but he had a pretty strong suspicion it was not a good price. So that's kind of empowered people, and the next stage is to see mobile payments taking off, which is just being implemented now after legal reforms. Anyway, I'm blathering on, and I want to give Cowie the floor in a minute. So I'll just run through a couple of other little points I'd like to make. I think English language is another big thing. 5 years ago when I started, it was hard to find a taxi driver who could even say, hello, how are you? And now you can't shut them up half the time. So that's really been extraordinary. And it reminds me of China when I was going there in the 80s, when it started opening up, the sheer force of will of people to teach themselves. I mean, even taxi drivers who haven't been to high school have taught themselves English, and a lot of them speak very passably. And I've got more serious points to make, but I think at this point I'll just end with this point that these days I think the Burma or Myanmar group in the media who've covered it either more recently or from the past really divide into the skeptics and the believers, and you often get a lot of the older hands being extremely cynical and accusing people of falling for the whole line, the sham reform, it's all a trick. Well, you know, the military does not look that happy that Aung San Suu Kyi's there, even though she's not the president. She's got her proxy president and she's guiding the president. And the commander-in-chief has made the point in speeches that he would like to see that country stay on the course it has been for the next 5 years, meaning for her term, or rather her government's term, he envisages that there will not be any radical change. Now, already we've seen a couple of key tests in Parliament where the military, who have 25% of seats, could have voted against, one, an effort to make Aung San Suu Kyi a so-called state councillor, a position they've created for her, that is almost like a prime minister. And clearly the military was not happy about it, but they did not have the guts to vote against it in Parliament. They just boycotted rather than actively vote against it. They're well aware that being seen to be too publicly opposed to her would put them in a very unpopular position, and they're also aware that they've got a lot of building back up to do. And the other thing is, I think, the sheer landslide of the NLD, because of Aung San Suu Kyi, has given them a virtual monopoly. It's almost a one-party state apart from this the military control. So it's this weird mixture of sort of, you know, dark forces from the past, military controlling 25%, and then all these amazing NLD people, half of who were sort of political activists, a lot of whom were in jail and now are ministers and members of parliament. So it's, I'd have to say it's even more addictive these days. And look forward to talking a little more about it, and I'll pass over to Koei now.
Right, Gawi, you've covered it longer than most. Okay. Viewed from a failing democracy, how do you see this emerging democracy in Burma?
Thank you very much. I have to admit, as a journalist covering Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, covering Myanmar has been the most interesting, because Myanmar has a better story to tell for obvious reasons. I will give you 3 reasons. Number one, because they have the ladies, Aung San Suu Kyi, the icon, the Louis Vuitton of world leader, regional leaders. You know, so for us, we are obsessed with her, especially from my point of view, I also write about her. Secondly, Myanmar is unlike any other, controlled by military Tatmadaw for the past 50 years. When you write about Laos, it's so boring. Write about Vietnam, so boring. They are communists. It's not like the military. They are like us, you know, the Thais. But they are much better. They are much better. I can go on for weeks about how come they are much better. Oh, I need an attitude adjustment. The country is also has minorities. 135 officially, they fought each other, you know, 17, 18, and we were obsessed. So the Thai, when they write about Myanmar, it's all about minority, about Chants, about the Kachins, about the Mons and all that. Number 4, I think for us, Myanmar is very rich in natural resources. All you talk about is the golden ticks from Myanmar's ages. At home, you talk about all these jades, all these jewelries and gems. So this is a story from Myanmar. So we were very interested, but we got it all wrong, because from the period of 1990, from May onward, when Aung San Suu Kyi won the elections, all the narrative was dominated by Western press. Sanction, the West, and all the narrative in our local press has been followed that kind of information. Only in 1988, until the elections that Aung San Suu Kyi won the first time, the Thai media has their own narrative. They were very excited. There was a lot of students cross over the border. Some of them, at least 2,000 or 3,000 more still live in Thailand. At the moment, there's still 120 displaced person along the border. Hopefully, these people in the future, within this 2 years, I bet will be given Thai citizenship. And only that very short period, you have Thai own narrative. We were very excited. The students come. We were democracy, very flourishing at the time. I'm talking about the past, not the present time. So don't get it wrong, okay? So that's the only period. And then later on, as Myanmar progressed, I think it's dawned on the Thais that the Tatmadaw really has a plan. And it's getting obvious to us when Kim Yoon came to Thailand to discuss with the government at the time. As you can see, at that time, Thaksin's government sort of support Kim Yoon very much. I did not know that Kim Yoon was not liked by his own colleagues, because Kim Yoon's most famous crime is he tries to use the information against other military's colleague, so much so that it's undermined. Whoever undermines the unity of Tatmadaw will have to face the what the military says, greatest punishment, that is purged from the military. So since then, the Thai also realized that even Kim Yoon was out, the 7-point peace plans was still on. So we realized that once the decision is made in Myanmar, the Tatmadaw will carry out until its finale, including whatever you have gone through. This is very interesting because it was revealed to me by a senior officer that has a good chance to interrogate it at the end of last year. He told me that without implemented in full and in the ferocious, violent way.
Received it.
Hello? In a violent way, there is no way Myanmar will attain the so-called November 8th free and fair election that has now been applauded over and over again, and also with the victory of Aung San Suu Kyi. So he told me, he said that once the military made decision in Tatmadaw tradition, it will be carried out and they will not change it, even though they have to go to a very violent means. For example, you have numerous crackdowns, whether it's the 2007 Saffron revolutions, the Nagi's aftermath, continue with the referendums, and then you have even at latest last year before the elections, there were some rumors that there could be a postponement of general elections because of some student protests. These, according to this officer, very senior one, he said that we could not bend at all. We have to follow. And now when he looked back again, last month I met him again, he looked back and said that now people start really, appreciate is a strong word in the sense that what Tatmadaw has done is follow strictly the peace plans that they have in advance and no change. In comparison with Thailand, we have hundreds of roadmaps and we change every time. And that is also amazing. We change not only the plan, also the people. In Myanmar, they kick out the people, they keep on the plan. So a finale is very good. So you have to give credits So now you have Myanmar that is shaping up. And I have to tell you that from now on, Myanmar will be the game changer. Can you imagine with Aung San Suu Kyi? Aung San Suu Kyi, by the way, have written a letter to ASEAN leaders, said that she will attend the foreign ministerial meeting, the annual meeting in Vientiane. But I still have no confirmation whether she will go to Sochi or not. I don't think she would go to Sochi on the 19th of May to have a special meeting, ASEAN-Russia summit at Sochi to commemorate 20th anniversary of ASEAN-Russia relation. So she is well aware that she has to connect it with ASEAN. She has failed completely to reconnect it with ASEAN since July 1995. I knew the story behind this because in the early years, Aung San Suu Kyi had a very good attitude toward ASEAN, thinking mistakenly that ASEAN could help her. But as it turned out, ASEAN has not helped her in any way throughout all this year. Even after she was released from house arrest, ASEAN leaders still was very reluctant to contact her. So she very well keep that in mind. Until recently, just the letter was written to ASEAN leaders just only last week. So she was very slow in coming, in trying to reconcile with ASEAN leader. I think deep in her heart, she still had to really come to terms with the ASEAN leader. So I will watch carefully how she behaves herself with the ASEAN leaders. I think she probably will have a better relation with Retno Masuri from Indonesia because she's a petite woman, you know. You have Aung San Suu Kyi, very beautiful, tall, slim, walk into the room full of men. I think that would be the best day for photographer to take pictures. By the way, I will have a few recommendations for Suu Kyi to when Suu Kyi attend ASEAN meeting. You know, Suu Kyi, being the world democratic icon, she always stand in the middle. People always talk to her, but in ASEAN, she must not stand in the middle. She should let the chair stand in the middle. The Laotian chair will be in the middle. I'm afraid somebody have to remind her. She might get used to it and stay in the middle. Secondly, I think she has to listen, because all the time people listen to her and follow her. Because in ASEAN, you have to listen for the rest of the 9 ASEAN leaders, and get consensus. And I don't think it will be very difficult. Suu Kyi will get her ways. So it will be very interesting. And there are many other more when you talk about Myanmar, because Myanmar today is no longer Myanmar of the past. And I think you have to give credits to the Myanmar people, including the Tatmadaw, including the minorities who have fought whatever they believe for independence, and the people who endure, suffer, and deliver. After 1990, they delivered the same outcome. In November 8th, it's the biggest revenge that you can have against the Tatmadaw. I think that is the best gift the Myanmar people give it to themselves. And then they have Aung San Suu Kyi. I myself was very surprised that Aung San Suu Kyi would receive such a overwhelming vote, similar to 1990. And for me, this is a positive development for the region, and particularly for Thailand. Being a Thai relation with Myanmar has never been normal since 1962 when Nevin took over. The relation has been very adverse, no real dialogue. It's all about trading, economic interest, and security. The Myanmar side wants security guarantees. The Thais want the economics. The West interest group in the Thai military and businessmen. All this interchange stopped 3-4 years ago, particularly I think in the last 2 years when the peace process gained momentum. And then finally, I think the government in Naypyidaw realized that the Thai really can contribute to the peace process and did not have the intention as the leaders believe, Thammadol believe that Thailand often support the minorities group living along the Thai borders to undermine the central government in Naypyidaw. I think the Thammadol leader, after they realized that it's only certain officers in along the Thai security apparatus that really help, but Thailand had no policy, and it was a big moment when the minorities group who attend the ceasefire and the Naypyidaw invite Thailand to be a witness to sign the partial countrywide ceasefire in October last year. So that was the indication that for the first time, Myanmar really accept Thailand argument that it has not all along support the minority to undermine the central government. The other reason also is this. One of the most amazing things that happened in the 17th month has been this military government has improved the working condition. It should have been much better than this, but they have improved the condition of the Myanmar migrant worker with registrations, both in the fishing industry and overall, I think around, not a real figures, maybe 2 million out of 4.5 migrant workers here now get registered and receive all the better payments and well protection, thanks to external pressure, particularly from the US government over the trip report, trafficking in-person report that forced the Thai government, particularly this government, to work harder. Work harder means really work harder. You prosecute the wrongdoers. Up to the last month, 92 persons were in jail, prosecuted. And this has been used as an affidavit that this government has done well. President Thein Sein has personally expressed gratitude to General Prayut for helping improve the lot of the Myanmar worker here. So for the first time, in the past 2-3 decades, the narrative of the Myanmar workers in Thailand has suddenly become non-negative. I used the word non-negative. Before that, it was very negative. Did you remember in early last year when there was a rumor that the military government will check on the work registration? Suddenly, what happened was that Cambodian worker, 120 of them, returned home immediately. The whole en masse returned home. That created big problems, not only for Thailand, but also from Cambodia. Thailand, a lot of factories stopped working, but at the same time, Cambodia faced a crisis because you have 120 with no job return home. So, but within a week, there was a turnaround. Thailand changed the policy, set up a special table, and then the Cambodian worker were able to return. But the point was very simple. Why the Myanmar worker were not fooled by the rumor? Because they were confident that at the time there were better attitude by both the government. This also lead to the finalization of Tawai's deep sea port. In the beginning, as you know, there has been a lot of delay for the past 10 years over this. So with all these developments, the Japanese saw the greatly improved Thai-Myanmar relation, particularly the leader at the end of last year decided to commit financially in all this. So all these things put together, for me as a journalist viewing emerging Burma as a game changer, not only concerning Myanmar ASEAN, concerning Myanmar Thailand, which I think if these two countries get together, it will serve as a major force in mainland Southeast Asia that will achieve political paradigms in the sense that we bring back the great games, into the mainland Southeast Asia, because since 1962, these two Buddhist countries never have normal relation. So beyond this ASEAN and Thailand, I think Myanmar will also play a very important role with the major power, because Myanmar is very intelligent when dealing with major power. Look at the way they handle ASEAN chair. During the ASEAN chair 2015, Myanmar has done an excellent job. A lot of people said that, Myanmar did a good job because of low expectation. That was not true. There were very high expectation of Myanmar, because Myanmar is the only new member among ASEAN that speak English, using English. The rest using French. The Vietnamese, the Laos, the Cambodians. I still remember covering when Vietnam joined ASEAN in 1995. Vietnamese Foreign Minister Nguyen Man Kem came to Thailand, give an inaugural speech in French, because they thought that is French language used in ASEAN, and Thai government has to look for French interpreter. They couldn't find it. So that's one of the anecdotes which show you. So Myanmar has a very good advantage in using English. So they produce one of the longest joint statements, over 12,000 words. Normally, ASEAN joint statement about 7,000 or 8,000. So the way Myanmar did it is that we include everybody's opinions, so nobody get angry. Unlike Brunei, they try to cut. It's too long. So this is the way Myanmar has handled the situation. So Myanmar was able to protect the ASEAN centrality, to protect the so-called ASEAN interests, and then came out with a very strong view. For example, out of the ASEAN statement on South China Sea that came out in the past few years, the strongest was during the Myanmar chair. A lot of people didn't know it, and in fact, during January of 2014, there's many incidents. So that show you that Myanmar is very able when it comes to handling. After all, it was the first ASEAN country to say no to China, Mid-Son Dam, and all these relations. And I think from now on, Myanmar will be able to share the views about its relation with ASEAN or over on China, just like when Vietnam joined ASEAN, because ASEAN also learned a lot from Vietnam, the way Vietnam handle China. These are the things that I think Myanmar can contribute to ASEAN. And also, Myanmar already far ahead than many other countries in ASEAN. I will give you an example. According to, this is very funny, according to Reporters Sans Frontiers, Press Freedom Index, Press Freedom Index this year ranked Singapore 154 and Myanmar 145. That's the only index in the world that Myanmar can beat Singapore. And it's true. And this is the most amazing about Myanmar media development. And no country in Southeast Asia used media so creatively in the past 4 years. In fact, without media, Myanmar will never attain such a high status at all. And in fact, Myanmar using media can be a subject of a dissertation, because without media, Myanmar will never gain the credibility and the legitimacy as of today, because state media has no credibility, so they use exile media, import them, use the Mizima, use Ilavadi, use DVB, use all sorts of foreign, including foreign journalists who come and write about Myanmar, disseminate information about reform, economic, political, and also disseminate to minority. These are the things that have done. Laos and Vietnam, after 30 years, look at the media development, still the same. They have not. Exile media is still fighting against the government. In Paris, in St. Paul's, in Minnesota, and all. So, it's the Myanmar exact idea, the plan that they have, that been executed so precisely that I really jealous about them. I wish Thailand can do so, in the sense that have a plan, execute it, never change it. But if you do so, then there's no reason to live in Thailand. Thank you.
Right. Well, Gawi mentioned the protocol for the pictures in Sochi and Vientiane when they come up and where Suu Kyi will stand, and of course that's one of the interesting topics because her position is not, in any sense, kosher. It's a very unusual situation. She's now become state councillor, which is a specially created position. She's pushed the envelope against the military. As you said, they walked out rather than vote it down. But the question really is, what can go wrong at this stage? Gawi's presented a very positive picture. Things are going forward. There's a big master plan that they haven't confided in us. We all got it wrong. Here we are. Suu Kyi is in power. Gwen, what can go wrong at this point?
Well, I think
You must have some reservations.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, there are people clearly not happy about this. They don't have the guts to, actively obstruct or be seen to be taking her down or obstructing. But there's a lot of wheels moving in the background, I suspect. And one of those is because of the complex balance of power and how fiendish the constitution of Myanmar is and how it disperses power so sort of excruciatingly well, so that there's check and checkmate and check and balance on everything except one thing, which is how the NLD was very smart about exploiting this one little gap, which was that the one important legislative body or even government body that the military is not represented on is a constitutional tribunal of 9 judges. Which rules on these big matters of dispute on legislation, parliament. And that is controlled by the ruling party, which appoints the judges onto this tribunal. And that was how they did it. They cooked up a bill, which, of course, they now control a simple majority in parliament. They put the bill through, and any objection that Tatmadaw, the military, had legally, the NLD has the numbers on the Constitutional Tribunal, which of course would rule that it's absolutely fine and kosher to create a new position which actually has prime ministerial powers. That has irked the military a lot. I think that's the biggest red flag. Another one was clearly prisoner releases. I mean, the military spent a lot of time putting these guys in jail, and they released the ones that they felt they could release, but there was quite a few left in there. And the way this happened was getting around the control by the military of the military has 3 cabinet positions that control, for example, prisons as well as police, as well as the military under Home Affairs. And they generally have to sign off on prisoner releases. But, of course, there's the power of a presidential pardon. So, of course, these political prisoners we've seen released in the last few days were done through an extraordinary presidential pardon. So, of course, military's not out there celebrating the fact that guys that they tried to put in jail are now out. So, no, they're not happy, but how wrong could it go? I mean, some people, as I said, have a theory that it's all a big trick and there'll be diabolical plots to seize power. I think, as I said, the military's really shown how concerned it is about its public image. And I would say a lot of that has to do with the Commander-in-Chief, Min Aung Hlaing, who is himself eyeing the presidency for the next election in 5 years' time. He's conveniently extended his term, which he can do under the Constitution, for another 5 years. Well, not under the Constitution, under a rule, which will bring him up to election time. So I think he will be quite concerned as well to be seen, at least to be, if not totally supportive, at least not obstructive. So there is that. And would they shoot people and lock them up? I really doubt it in this day and age, and there's too much at stake now for the military as well. They are getting something they have craved for the last decades of isolation, which is they're getting interaction with the Western world, many more countries. They're being invited on training programs. The Americans, the British are taking notice of them. The next step is going to be training. There's already some training in non-combat areas, including police training as well. And this is very precious to the military. They've got a lot of face. They're actually quite engaged as well. So I don't think they're about to deflate the whole exercise by being nasty. And on the other hand, I would say if they do try, it's going to be a God Almighty fight, because Aung San Suu Kyi turned 71 this year. She's waited all her life for this. She's only got one shot at it. She'll be 76 by the time just nearing 76 by the time she leaves power. She's sacrificed so much. She spent nearly 15 years in house arrest, and she chose not to leave the country to see her husband when he was dying. She has sacrificed her children's upbringing and seeing them. Everything is dependent on this 5 years. She is not going to let anyone take this away from her. This is a very determined woman. So I would say she's actually more than a match in some ways for the military, because everything they come up with, she's cooking up another step. So it's like watching quite a complex game, although of course it's not a game because it's not that funny and the stakes are very high. But ultimately, I do feel sort of mildly optimistic. Some people feel very pessimistic, but I really doubt it'll get to shooting people in the streets. And I think a lot of international pressure is there now. And I was going to say, I cover business a lot, so I've seen the huge amounts of investment that are going in. $9 billion last year, predicted to be above that this year. Companies flooding in. Again, people's livelihoods are going up. The economy is booming. Of course, that never stops people doing stupid things. So, but my bet is that in a few years' time, it'll still be rolling along, and she will very much be hanging in there. And she's very determined to get what she wants. So I don't know even if she'll manage to change the constitution to enable her to be president. But you can bet your life that this prime ministerial role is going to get stronger and stronger. And alongside that, she's got foreign minister and this sort of minister of state, which is in the president's office, almost not necessary now that she's made herself a virtual prime minister.
Namal, what are the pressure points that you're looking at, things that might go wrong?
I think there are also, first of all, the relationship with the ethnic groups. That has to be carried forward. The peace process has to be picked up and developed into something more substantive. And there are always major pressure points there, because even among some of the ethnic groups there are disagreements. So that's a very volatile situation. It's not just about, it's to a large degree about ethnic self-determination, rights, federalism and so forth. And today, in fact, I think it was today or yesterday, Aung San Suu Kyi made a very positive statement on federalism. So the signals are good. However, it also comes down to divvying up natural resources, to resource distribution. Some of the Myanmar's major resources are in areas, border areas controlled by armed ethnic groups. So that's very, very complicated. It's a minefield. This is the first opportunity they really have in modern history to address these fundamental issues. So that's one pressure point. The second is land rights. You have a hangover from the previous regime, from the erstwhile military regime, which the previous regime was also trying to deal with. But now this regime, this government will have to deal with as well, which is land rights. A lot of people in Myanmar, probably the majority of the population, I haven't seen the statistics, but probably close to a majority of the population maybe don't even have land titles in the formal economy that we are used to. It's somewhat similar to in Thailand until quite recently with the hill tribes and the so-called sea gypsies and so forth. Land rights is a huge problem. That's one thing, and another one is environmental stress. You have a lot of again, because of the opening up of Myanmar, you have a lot of NGO activity. You had NGO activity even before the government opened up. I mean, the Mid-Zone Dam the cancellation of Mid-Zone Dam by Thein Sein didn't come out of the blue. Of course, there were also other considerations, like, for example, the inordinate influence of China, for example. But let's remember that the campaign to stop the Mitsun Dam was actually led by Myanmar NGOs. There were NGOs even under the military regime. So now they're even more, and you have a resistance against Tawai, you have resistance, of course, as you've seen, Letpadong, you have resistance to dams on the Salween. Mitsun is again coming up for negotiations, the Chinese are pushing it. So any of these, it's a volatile place, we all know that. Any of these could result in a flare-up. Arakan State, Rakhine State, you have that issue as well. So any of these could result in a flare-up, which the government will have to control and manage in a very canny sort of realpolitik way, but also showing tremendous statesmanship. And we have a government right now which is untested, so we don't know going forward what's going to happen. So there are a lot of pressure points. It's a question of just muddling through the next few years with a modicum of stability, and then we'll come to an election, which will be even more interesting, as Gwen says, because you have a government which hopefully stay in power without any interference for 5 years, and you'll have a track record to assess.
Right, Peter.
Peter Jansen, the banco, which is also owned by Nikkei. Yeah. I wonder, the panel is three distinguished journalists. I wonder if you could all talk about the journalistic relationship with Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD. I happened to be in Myanmar during the election, and NLD basically had a clampdown on information. You couldn't talk to any of the NLD MP candidates. They wouldn't say anything because Aung San Suu Kyi said, "Don't say anything to the press." Yeah, I mean, and now she's in power. What's happening? I don't know. I haven't been there for a few months, but I mean, has she gotten her PR down? Because as far as I'm concerned, NLD's PR is just about as bad as the Tamadors. Yeah.
Yeah. You are so right.
This is one of Gwen's favourite
Yeah,
points.
PR is not a strong point of the NLD, I would say, which is the understatement of the millennium. Which is odd because she has absolutely no reason to be so hostile to the press, because I think the world's media, there has been almost negative media, yes, in the last year or two about, New York Times, the shine comes off, other people sort of being more critical about certain sort of autocratic ways. But it is true that she actually seems to have quite a like of secrecy, and she even keeps her own advisors in the dark. I know because I've interviewed some of them and they are completely in the dark on some very important points. And she tends to operate a little bit like, a sort of Chinese Communist Party with everyone on a need-to-know basis with little cells who know a bit. Nobody knows all of it except a little small group around her. And there were attempts to have a PR, press relations people, but I would have to agree with Peter. We weren't getting much help or support during the election campaign, and it's a shame because there is a lot of goodwill there, much more than there was towards the military or the administration. I don't even know if this is changing because you usually don't know what number to call. There's not really a great deal to go on there, and there's no regular process for interviews, and she has told, or she's ordered all her MPs not to speak to press about any party matters or policy matters, and obviously that's the only reason press would actually want to talk to one of the MPs, unless you want to ask them what their favourite colour is. So that's an issue, and I have found, though, I was in Naypyidaw 2.5 weeks ago for the handover, and I found that NLD MPs are so excited and sort of quite eager to talk that they do take the risk, and you kind of worry all the time that you particularly worry when they're telling you something and you're thinking, oh, maybe you shouldn't really be saying that because you'll get into trouble with the boss. And there was a wonderful interview the other day run in, I think, Myanmar Times, where one of Aung San Suu Kyi's own cabinet members, an NLD member, said, oh, I can't imagine she'd be keeping all these ministries because she's really quite old and she might really get very tired doing this. And I'm thinking, that guy's going to get it, you know, because there is a lot of, not fear, but there's a lot of timidity about towards her. She does rule with quite an iron fist, and she is very exacting, and I think there are punishments meted out. She has expelled people from the party. She expels people left, right and centre. You know, she's decreed that they give a percentage of their salary, which is very meagre, for party funds and various other things. So it's quite like a sort of institutional boarding school at times. Anyway, hopefully, you know, hopefully it will get sorted out, because now this is not just a question of the media invading privacy. I think, you know, given how she's westernised, she lived in England for a lot of her life, she understands Western ways and very well understands Western media, and she's very partial to the BBC, so they always seem to manage to get an interview, but very few others do. And it's not just with her. I think it's just about getting the system smoothed out so that, you know, you can actually convey and also use the media to communicate what you're doing, your policies, and put the best spin on it. But otherwise, it's all gone a little more sour than it was 3 years ago, I must say. Any insights on that, guys?
Yeah, I think she had a bust up with the BBC in London 2 weeks ago. So, Michelle Hussain. Yeah. Sorry, Gawee, follow on.
Well, I think that there are two reasons. I think she does not trust Myanmar media. I think in 1990 she suffered because she talked too much, and the military terminal know what she has in mind. This time she was able to carry out all her plan with little or no information around to the public. I think secondly is that the inexperienced Myanmar journalists, since I've been very close to some of the senior journalists, and one of my friends now replaced U Yetut, MOI Minister Pimian, who is Pimian. I think he probably will advise Aung San Suu Kyi how to cope with media. And I think next month there will be a major meeting between all the media's editor with Pimian, the Minister of Information. And I think in the future there will be a much more systematic dissemination, because without sufficient timely information, it will be very difficult for Aung San Suu Kyi to carry out her task, because there are a lot of expectation. How can you manage without media engaging with the public, disseminate what the government has done, what the government failed, what has been delayed and all that. This is the things that she needs to do. She has been given interview, but not to the media, local media, and there's a lot of complaints among the local journalists. You can read VOA, you can read BBC, Washington Post, but not local medias. So I think these things, I think she is aware, I mean, being raised and educated abroad, how information play in promoting democracy and public participation. And also there is now, at the moment, a draft of access to information law. So in this sense, it's very progressive. As far as the media sector is concerned, Myanmar is actually on the top 4 of ASEAN letters, because it has all the professional organization, press council, broadcasting law now is still debating the new draft that will follow the Thailand example, Thai PBS, and there are many other things very advanced. So in this sense, I think media will play pivotal roles in Myanmar society, especially under her leadership. She cannot ignore. She better get used to it. And I think if she continue this bad attitude, it will be very, very, what do you call, bad for her administration, because the local media will not get sufficient information timely. Thank you.
Well, in other words, there will be more exaggeration, rumour, guessing, and, you know, then in turn...
Well, that is free media. I mean, you look at press system in Southeast Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, those who enjoy media freedom. We just hope that with a better system, and I think Myanmar media has a big advantage over Southeast Asian media in that for the past 10 years or so, in particularly the past 4 years, they have received numerous training from all well-known international media organizations, literally 48 of them rushed to Myanmar, and everybody get the best training of media. In fact, they should come to Thailand, Thai journalists with more training now.
To get Myanmar media.
Just a little historical note. So Suu Kyi was always very, very reticent about mapping her plans. So that if in the 89, 80, 90, if you asked her what the NLD manifesto was, sorry, 89, late 88, she would be very reluctant to say anything about it. And I remember once asking a question about, has the military ever done anything that's good? And she said no. And I said, well, what about ASEAN? She said, well, that was our idea. So she sort of nixed it. So she's very secretive. There's nothing new about that. Anyway, question?
Hi, my name is Chuck Howard, FCCT member, and my question is really simple, and that is, why did they do it? And what was their thinking process?
Well,
the military.
They is the military, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Well, essentially, it's a matter of speculation because we haven't heard from the horse's mouth. And who is the horse? In this case, it is Tan Shui. We have to face it. He is the architect of the transition. Now, what are the factors that played upon their minds? One, they instinctively knew, and they were pragmatic. They instinctively knew that the country had to get to some semblance of democracy at some point in time. It was not, they saw the Arab Spring, right? They saw what happened after that. They did have this roadmap to go back to democracy, to what they called, this law called the disciplined flourishing democracy in those days. But they had the roadmap, and as Kabir said, they follow the roadmap. That's what they know to do, right? Another factor was the relationship with China. China always came to their rescue in multilateral forums during the dictatorship years. But China also had become, the Burmese, the nationalist Burmese elite were never very comfortable with China. These old military generals had fought China-backed troops in the old Cold War communist insurgency days, right? So they were not very enamored of China. The alliance was an alliance of convenience, and they found China's increasing influence possibly slightly overbearing. And this was one factor in the cancellation of the Midsun Dam, which was basically the signal to China. So they wanted better relations with the West. They knew that the population was restive. They could not afford another 2007 when they were beating up and shooting monks. They could not afford that. And they saw what was happening in the rest of the world, and they knew it was inevitable. They had some sense of history, and they decided that a calibrated democracy would be they decided to relinquish power in a very carefully calibrated manner, not abruptly. So it wasn't, they were not being forced by a bloody revolution, not being kicked out of the out of office by a bloody revolution, or in fact, perhaps even a non-violent revolution like EDSA in the Philippines in 1986. They didn't want that. They didn't want to leave office in this sort of ignominious fashion. So, as I said, we haven't heard from Tan Shui himself. I would love to hear from him. But these are the calculations that most analysts and even people in the military basically say were behind the decision.
So just catch a question on that. I mean, do you think that with the military so deeply embedded in the economy that it was actually a political decision or a business decision? We can make an awful lot more money out of a much bigger economy, and it's not going to happen if we carry on in this way.
Yeah, well, I'll leave Gwen to answer that, but the political thing, the economic aspect. But also, if I may add, another question is, in the military's minds, they were secure. Look, the military has been the only major institution in Myanmar for decades. It is right now still the most powerful institution. It runs the sinews of the country are run through the General Administrative Department, the 3 ministries which the military controls. So they have their firewalls in place. Right now, the NLD has come up and is lapping at the firewalls. But the firewalls are still very much there. The 25% is still very much there. The 3 ministries they control, the backbone of the country, and all security is still very much there. So why would they actually be insecure? I mean, it is certainly challenging for them. As Gwen mentioned, there are long faces in Parliament, but they have no reason to feel insecure. They hold the whip hand in any case.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to add to that, which is I did a whole big paper on this very question, and I interviewed so many people and read so much and thought about it, and I really have come to the conclusion there is a theory that there was a hidden thing, like a single thing that was the trigger. There was no single trigger. You'll hear all kinds of things, but some of the points Nirmal raised are absolutely true. They all went into the pot, and it was really, as he said, Tan Shui, but you'll hear a popular theory is that the devastation of Cyclone Nargis, which killed killed 140,000.
Yes.
It conservatively killed 140,000, possibly much more, and devastated the country. Myanmar's final acceptance by ASEAN, and suddenly the generals were going regularly to places like Singapore, seeing these gleaming capitals of the ASEAN neighbours that they had, and thinking, gee, where did we go wrong? And, there's those 2 are very big factors and other things, but this was all in Nargis was 2008, ASEAN was in the late 90s. Late 90s is when it seems that he began drawing up and thinking about this transition. But let's not forget also that they had tried several times to open up, but in a sort of sneaky or controlled way. They basically knew they wanted the West in, they wanted the US to lift sanctions, but somehow they wanted to retain control. So they tried to do it in sort of sneaky ways or flawed ways. And I think finally they came to the conclusion that the only thing was to draw up this roadmap that promised to draw up a constitution, hold elections, and convene parliament. They're the key points in the roadmap, and it was drawn up in late 90s, I think, and early 2000s, unveiled in 2003 or something. And he stuck to it. The old man stuck to it. And the other thing that would suggest that it really was all Tan Shui's sort of conception is that in 2010, after the November election, he shuffled off into, he just went. You've never seen, he's never appeared really in public since. He's never spoken publicly. He had one meeting with her after she won the elections, and he's a very shadowy figure overseeing it, and people are obsessed about how much is he still controlling it now, because he has no institutionalized power, but people say he pulls the strings. There's a lot in the senior military ranks that owe a lot to him, including the current commander-in-chief, so maybe he is still powerful, but anyway, he's no cuddly Democrat, and he was presided over the most, some of the darkest years, and everyone thought he'd sort of become an increasingly ruthless tyrant, and to see him just, go away, having instituted the roadmap and seen it through, you sort of think, is this for real? It's all too easy. You sort of think he might come roaring back, but anyway, the point is, there just wasn't any one thing, and I don't know where they think it's going to lead next, because the roadmap ends with the election, so I haven't seen a roadmap mark too.
Yeah, I remember just a couple of years ago now, the author Amitav Ghosh was here giving a talk, and we had a similar talk about the transition in Myanmar, and Amitav made an interesting point. He said the Burmese are very proud people, and they felt bad at being ostracized, being the sort of pariah nation, being an embarrassment to ASEAN, being the butt of every media commentary. So this was also a factor that they really wanted to take their place, the rightful place they see in the world, rather than sit in a backwater.
I like to second what Gwen said. I think if you want to talk about one trigger, is after Nargis, because that's the first time that Myanmar senior officials realized that they did not have any connection and network with outside world. Once Nargis hit Myanmar, they got stuck and they realized that they need help, but they don't know how. So ASEAN came in. I will give you one example. They don't have banking system. During the first 3 months of Nargis, a senior official of Myanmar has to fly in and took cash from Bangkok Bank, Central Bangkok Bank, in boxes and fly back to pay. So there's no banking system. In 2008, nothing really exists. So Nargis taught them that you need international network to help, and there are sympathy, high level of empathy to help you. And I think that's the first time that really give the confidence to Tatmadaw people, especially Tan Soy, that okay, we are not really isolated. Nobody want to punish us. At least there are good people out there that want to help us. I think if you want to locate one trigger, I think the Nargis, the aftermath, that also encourage both public participation from civil society, people get to help, those who does not know, getting into the all these civil works. I think I would say that.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I mean, in the Traders Hotel in Rangoon after Nargis, it was full of NGOs with laptops. The regime had never seen anything like this in their lives, and the world came to Myanmar because of Nargis.
That's true, but let's not forget, Nargis was 2008. I mean, Tan Shui conceived of this whole change years before that. Years before.
But I think the cultural shift could have come in Nargis when they had.
I think it reinforced it.
When the relationship with ASEAN also bore fruit.
Yes.
Because ASEAN built the bridge.
Yeah.
And also the old chestnut about the Burmese strongman, when does he disappear? It was straight back to Ne Win. I mean, he stepped down officially 88, and he was still in play speculatively until 97 at least, and then he actually did decline. So this is something that's very much a Burmese pattern.
It's a very Burmese thing. I was looking last week, Tain Sein, when he left, you saw, he shaved his head and became a monk. And only for Southeast Asian thing. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, it happened in Thailand, Suthep. So, I mean.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, sorry, bad joke. Question?
My name's Corey Wright, former intern photographer with the Bangkok Post. My question is in regards to the ethnic minorities in Myanmar. They've afforded brief mention here, and you noted them as one of the pressure points, their relationship with the current government and how that'll be handled. What do you see as the most likely avenue forward, given that a lot of these ethnic minorities were at some stage fighting for a level of autonomy or independence from the central government, and how is that to be reconciled with Aung San Suu Kyi's message of unity, or in the case of the Rohingya Muslims, the people who just want to be noticed as citizens?
Well, I'll just quickly say something, and then, Nirmal touched on this about the, decentralisation, federalism, and that even the mention of the word federalism used to be taboo and illegal, and Aung San Suu Kyi brought it up the other day. So it's a very sensitive thing. There are 14 states and regions. Half of those are ethnically dominated. There's myriad ethnic armed groups, although only about half a dozen very main ones that are serious ones. There used to be a lot of secessionist agendas. I don't think these days, I think very few, in fact, I don't know of any that are actually fighting for secession. They're fighting for autonomy, and in different sort of degrees. Muslims is another whole different thing. I mean, I've never seen. So that's in its own sort of special category, that issue, I think. But I would say that she knows very well, as Nirmal said, that it's a huge issue for her, because actually you know, the ethnic-dominated states are in the border regions, and they control the vast majority of onshore natural resources and wealth of the country, gems, timber, all kinds of rare earth, who knew, gold, you know, whatever. It's all in these ethnic-controlled regions. There's already, you know, it's been traditionally a big source of resentment amongst ethnic people that a lot of the riches of the states go to either cronies or the central government, and federalism has been a huge thing, and it looks like it's heading that way, and there will be a proper measure of federalism, but where it goes depends so much also on the peace process and cooperation with ethnic armed groups. But if you ask me, I mean, very few countries in the world are trying to negotiate with they're negotiating with 16 armed ethnic groups, and they're kind of in different factions. China is a huge factor with half of them, and funds some of them. You've got the largest standing army non-government in Myanmar, the WA, who control, like, you know, the drug trade and moving from heroin into yaba now, which is really flooding into Thailand. They're making a lot of money. They've got vested interests. So you can imagine what a headache it is. None of them actually really want to give up, you know, integrate. The guys who are controlling these groups do not want to give up their positions, obviously. So I think there's a lot working against the peace process. But if you want to move the country forward, obviously these areas are really poor. There's no manufacturing. I've been through a lot of those states. There's like almost no factories at all, very few jobs that are real jobs. And to get those jobs in, you've got to get investors. You've got to get investors to be confident that they can, you know, maybe set up a regional business in these states. And they should be very competitive. They're beautiful. They've got a lot of natural resources and labour force that is hungry for jobs, very cheap for workforce. But, you know, no one's going to set a foot in any of these places until they are assured that there will not be fighting breaking out around their factory, and that, you know, like guerrilla groups and military are going to come descending. So I'd say that's the stakes with that one. And maybe I'll leave Nirmal to...
And electricity and running water, of course. Infrastructure.
The what?